By the time that envelope hit the table, everybody in the room was already trapped. Not by walls, by silence. The kind that tells you nobody's leaving until somebody bleeds financially or otherwise. I clocked it the moment the lawyer hesitated. Men who deal in paper don't pause unless the paper carries a body count. His fingers shook like he just realized the room was full of wolves and he'd been holding the meat the whole time. Front row money. Old money. Black fabric, stiff posture, eyes trained forward like grief was a performance she'd perfected. Her sons sat tight beside her, uniforms pressed, spines straight, all three convinced the world still owed them something. They didn't know the bill had already come due. The woman by the door did. She didn't have a chair, didn't need one. She stood where people like her were always told to stand, out of the way, easy to ignore. But she wasn't ignoring anything. She was counting exits, measuring faces, reading the temperature. She had 3 kids tucked into her legs like they were bracing for impact, and they should have been. Because the moment that seal broke, the air turned sharp. The lawyer started talking, neutral voice, safe words, wife first, allowance, property that looked generous until you did the math. The widow's jaw tightened. She knew the math. She knew what her husband had built, and she knew that wasn't it. Then the lawyer paused. That pause did damage. He said the eldest son's name. That boy leaned forward, ready to receive the crown. Instead, he got insulted. A single dollar, not a mistake, not a joke. A message. The second son got the same, the third too. Now the room moved, chairs scraped. Breath got loud, somebody cursed. The widow stood like the ground had betrayed her, but the lawyer wasn't done. He didn't look at the sons again. He turned his head slowly like he wanted witnesses for what came next. He looked at the woman by the door. And that's when everybody realized this wasn't an inheritance reading. It was a transfer of power. He said her name, not a label. A name. Freedom came first. Clean, immediate, no conditions. That alone could have started a riot. Then came the land, the house, the fields, the business. Every account that mattered. Each word hit like a slap to the face of everyone who'd ever believed ownership was permanent. Then he named the children. Didn't just free them, claimed them, put bloodlines on paper that were never supposed to be spoken out loud. That room exploded. The eldest shouted. The widow screamed. One of the sons lunged forward like he forgot how many witnesses were watching him lose control. But the woman didn't move. That's the part people miss when they tell this story. They talk about money, land, scandal. They forget the stillness. She stood there holding her kids while a dynasty cracked in half around her. The widow crossed the room and got close. Too close. Close enough to promise something without raising her voice. That paper might hold in court, but courts don't stop knives. The woman didn't argue. She didn't deny. She didn't plead. She already understood the difference between legal power and real power. The lawyer pulled her aside fast, like he was trying to save a life without being seen doing it. Told her straight she was walking around with a target on her back now. Told her not to trust food she didn't cook, roads she didn't choose, faces that smiled too easily. Then he gave her a key, small thing, heavy meaning. He said the dead man had planned for this, said there were things hidden, insurance, leverage. That night when the house went quiet, she used it. She opened a door men had died to keep shut. And what she found inside wasn't money. It was truth stacked and waiting, enough to ruin families, enough to end lives, enough to turn survival into strategy. And before she could decide how to use it, somebody else made a move. Because when morning came, one of her children was gone. And whoever took her wasn't asking for money. They were asking her to fold. When the child disappeared, that's when the game showed its real face. No screaming, no chaos, just absence. That's how professionals do it. They don't knock things over. They remove one piece and wait to see who panics. She checked the rooms once. Then again, slow, careful, because panic gets children killed. Panic tells the other side you're weak. By the third sweep, she knew. This wasn't random. This wasn't rage. This was leverage. The note was thin, clean paper, slid under the door like it didn't want to leave fingerprints. 24 hours, sign everything away, or bury your daughter. No signature, no threats scribbled in anger. Whoever wrote it expected to be obeyed. She folded the paper once and put it in her pocket. Didn't cry. Didn't sit down. She already understood something the family upstairs didn't. They thought they were punishing her. They were negotiating. She went to the lawyer first, not because she trusted him, but because she needed a witness who understood rules. He read the note and went pale, said words like police, charges, law. She let him finish. Then she shook her head. Law doesn't protect you when power decides it's done pretending. She told him she wanted a message delivered, short, sharp, no emotion, the kind of message that makes people calculate instead of threaten, because she'd opened the safe. And she knew where the bodies were buried, not literally, worse, names, letters, numbers that didn't add up unless someone was lying to a nation at war. She dictated the message slowly, making sure every word landed where it needed to land, not a plea, a countdown. It went to the house she now owned but couldn't yet defend. Hours passed heavy. Every sound outside the lawyer's office made her spine tight. Carriages, boots, voices that weren't hers. Then one came, late afternoon, too deliberate to be mercy. The door opened and a man walked in carrying a child who wouldn't stop crying. The daughter clung to her like she knew the world had teeth now. The man didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He just said enough to let her know this was a warning, not a favor. She listened. Let him talk. Let him believe the upper hand was still his. Then she leaned in and said something that drained the color from his face. Not a threat, a fact. She named a crime no one knew she could prove. Named it clean, named it quiet. She watched the realization spread behind his eyes like ink in water. That's when the power shifted. He left without another word. The child was safe for now. But here's the thing about winning a round: you make yourself visible. Because before the sun went down, soldiers knocked on the front door. Not for her, for the widow. Chains. Charges, treason whispered loud enough to ruin reputations. The widow screamed, accused, pointed. But the woman by the stairs didn't move. She hadn't made that call, which meant somebody else had the same information. Somebody else had been watching the same board. And they weren't here to save anyone. They were here to collect. When the door finally closed and the house fell quiet again, a stranger stepped out of the shadows like he belonged there. Well-dressed, calm, smiling like a man who arrives only after the damage is done. He introduced himself without offering a hand. Said he represented an interested party, said his client owned copies of everything in that safe, and said the price was 40%, not a request, a deadline. Because when multiple players hold the same secrets, the danger isn't exposure, it's competition, and she realized then. She wasn't just fighting a family anymore. She was standing in the middle of a war between men who understood leverage. And none of them planned to lose. The stranger didn't sit until he'd already won half the room. That's how I knew he wasn't bluffing. He spoke soft. Too soft for a man asking for 40% of a kingdom. Soft like someone who'd already rehearsed the ending and was just waiting for the actors to catch up. He laid it out clean. Copies of the letters, copies of the ledgers, copies of the sins. Enough to bury reputations that thought they were immortal. He didn't threaten. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. When you've got proof, volume is unnecessary. 40%, he said. By sunset, not cash, ownership, that's important. Cash spends once. Ownership eats forever. The son, the loud one, started pacing. Anger leaking out of him like sweat. He wanted to fight. Men like him always do. They think fists can fix problems created by paper. She stayed still. She watched the stranger's eyes instead of his mouth. Watched where they drifted when he talked about leverage. When he mentioned the arrest, when he smiled just a little too long. That smile told her something. He wasn't the brain, he was the courier. Couriers don't invent plays, they deliver them. She asked one question: who's your client? The stranger smiled again, smaller this time, someone who planned ahead. That was the tell. This wasn't opportunistic. This wasn't chaos. This was a long play. Somebody had copied those documents before the will was even read. Somebody had waited for the family to implode before stepping forward. Somebody patient. When the stranger left, the room felt smaller. Like walls had moved in to listen. The son finally stopped pacing. Looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Not as property, not as a problem. As a variable, they argued. Quiet, ugly. Honest in a way rich families never are until it's too late. He accused her of stealing. She reminded him who'd been stealing for generations. But that argument didn't matter, because the real enemy wasn't in the room. She went back to the lawyer, pressed him, cornered him. Asked the one question men hate when they're hiding something. Who else knew? He didn't answer at first. That pause again. Same pause as the envelope, same pause as the will. Then he said it. The middle son, not the loud one, not the youngest, the overlooked one. The one who'd been copying documents while everyone else was fighting for scraps. The one who understood that inheritance wasn't about blood, it was about timing. She felt it click. The arrest, the blackmail, the stranger, all chess moves, all designed to clear the board. The middle son wasn't trying to win the family war. He was trying to survive it alone. By sunset they signed, 40% gone. The stranger returned the documents, smiled again, promised peace. Peace is always temporary. That night she sat with her children in a house that didn't feel like shelter anymore. Just territory that could be taken again if she misstepped. She understood the truth then. Owning the land had never been the victory. Walking away alive would be. And somewhere out there, the man who'd engineered it all was already planning his next move. Because players like that don't stop when they get what they want. They stop when there's nothing left to take. Signing that paper didn't end the war. It just changed who was winning this round. She knew it the moment the ink dried. Deals made under pressure don't buy peace. They buy time. And time in the wrong hands is just another weapon. The middle son never showed his face. That told her everything. Men who orchestrate moves like that don't stand in the room when the consequences land. They stay back, watch reactions, measure damage, decide what to squeeze next. The stranger disappeared the same way he arrived. No goodbye, no reassurance, just gone, like a receipt you don't get to keep. By morning the house felt different. Not hostile, observed, servants spoke less. Doors stayed closed longer, every footstep echoed like it might be counted by someone she couldn't see. She didn't unpack, that's how you know someone's already planning their exit. The eldest son came to her that night. Not angry this time, smaller, stripped down by betrayal. He didn't ask for forgiveness. Men like him rarely do. He just asked if they were safe now. She told him the truth. No one's ever safe when secrets are the currency. That answer scared him more than shouting would have. Then came the soldiers again. Not arrests this time. Orders. The land was being requisitioned. The house too. War doesn't care about wills. War takes what it wants and writes apologies later. 48 hours. That's all she got. 48 hours to decide whether to fight for property she couldn't defend or protect children who couldn't run fast enough if she waited too long. She chose speed. She took paper. She took money she could carry. She left everything else behind like bait. The middle son would inherit ashes. Let him choke on them. They moved at night. Quiet, paid the right people, avoided flags and uniforms. Hunger rode with them, cold too, but fear stayed behind. Fear belongs to places that think they own you. When they crossed into territory that didn't recognize her past, she learned the final lesson of power. What you own only matters if you can stand on it. Her land burned. Her fortune dissolved. The house became rubble with a story nobody wanted to remember. But her children lived. Years later, men would argue about whether she won or lost. They'd miss the point. She didn't beat the system. She outlasted it, and the man who thought he'd played her. He got the land. He didn't get the future. Because power isn't about what you take. It's about what survives after you're done taking. Here's the part nobody tells right. They say she ran. That's lazy thinking. Running is panic. What she did was reposition. By the time the fires reached the land she used to own, she was already somewhere the middle son couldn't touch without exposing himself. She moved like someone who understood heat maps before anyone named them. Churches, back rooms, people who didn't ask questions because questions get people killed. Money thinned. Names changed. The children learned early when to stay quiet. That's how survival gets taught. The middle son kept the company, at least on paper. He wore the victory like a tailored coat. Sat at tables his brothers couldn't afford anymore. People called him smart, strategic, a man who understood timing. What they didn't see was the cost, because every deal he made after that came with hesitation. Every handshake lingered half a second too long. He'd look at faces and wonder who else had copies. Who else had learned the lesson she learned first? Leverage never disappears, it just changes hands. Years passed. The war ended, laws changed, flags fell, but some things stayed the same. Men still hunted control, women still paid the price, and children still carried decisions they never made. She built something smaller, quieter, stronger. A house no one wanted to steal, a life no one could contest. Her children grew with questions she didn't answer all at once. Some truths you give in pieces, some you wait until they're strong enough not to break under them. And every now and then she'd hear a name. The middle son, always in trouble, never ruined, always just ahead of consequence. That's how men like him survive, by staying one move ahead of justice and 3 moves behind guilt. But here's the thing about long games. They don't end when one side thinks they've won. They end when the board disappears. And one night, years later, a letter found its way to her hands. No return address, no signature, just one line. He's asking questions about you again. That's when she knew. The past wasn't done collecting, and the man who thought he'd taken everything was finally realizing. She walked away with the one thing he never could: control. When a man starts asking questions after years of silence, it's never nostalgia, it's hunger. She didn't rush. That's the mistake people make when they hear their name whispered by the past. They move too fast and show their hand. She did the opposite, slowed everything down. Watched who asked first, who answered too quickly, who suddenly remembered favors they never called in before. Questions travel, so do warnings. The message didn't say what he wanted. It didn't have to. Men like him only come back for 2 reasons: fear or opportunity. And fear usually hides inside opportunity when it gets older. She changed routes. Changed routines. Let the kids stay close without telling them why. Children don't need every truth, they just need to know when to listen. A week later, someone tried to follow her. Badly, that told her something too. If it were him, it would have been cleaner. This was a probe, a test run. Somebody else trying to impress the boss by bringing back something useful. She stopped in a crowded place, turned suddenly, met the man's eyes. He looked away first. Rookies always do. That night she burned a letter she'd been holding onto for years. One of the last pieces from the safe. Not the most damaging, just enough to remind the world she still existed. It surfaced quietly. Wrong hands, right ears. By morning the questions stopped. But silence like that isn't peace. It's recalculation. Because somewhere a man who thought he owned the ending was being reminded that stories don't close just because you want them to. They close when the last witness decides they're done talking. And she wasn't done. Not yet. Silence came back wrong. Too clean. Too sudden. When noise disappears like that, it's not because danger left. It's because danger learned patience. She felt it in the pauses between footsteps, in the way doors stayed shut just a breath longer than usual, in how certain names stopped circulating altogether, like somebody had swept the board and reset the pieces. That's when she knew he'd understood the reminder. And when men like him understand something, they don't retreat. They adapt. A month later, the offer came, not directly, not stupidly. It arrived through a voice she didn't recognize, carried by someone who pretended this was coincidence. A job, a meeting, a conversation about settling old matters. That's predator language. Soft edges, sharp center. She didn't answer yes. She didn't answer no. She waited, because waiting forces the other side to show its impatience. 2 days after that, one of the children came home shaken. Not hurt, not touched, just watched. Someone had stood too close, asked the wrong kind of question, smiled like they already knew the answers. That was the line. She understood then what this really was. Not revenge, not curiosity, containment. He wasn't trying to take anything from her anymore. He was trying to make sure she never became a problem again. That's when she reached for the last thing she'd never used. Not a document, not a letter, a name. One person who'd survived the old world and learned how to profit in the new one. Someone who understood that leverage doesn't expire, it compounds. She sent word quietly, didn't explain, didn't beg, just said she was ready to talk. And somewhere far away, a man who thought he'd already won felt the ground shift under his feet without knowing why. Because the most dangerous move in any long game isn't attack, it's alliance, and the board was about to get crowded. The reply didn't come fast. That told her everything she needed to know. People with nothing answer quick. People with options take their time. When the message finally arrived, it wasn't written. It was spoken. Passed mouth to mouth until it reached her without fingerprints or proof. Tomorrow night, don't bring fear, don't bring names. That was respect. She went alone, not because she was reckless, but because bringing protection tells the wrong story. Power recognizes confidence before it recognizes muscle. The place was neutral ground, loud enough to hide a conversation, quiet enough to remember one. The kind of spot where deals get shaped, not signed. He was already there, older now, not slower. Eyes that didn't chase movement because they already knew where everything was. The kind of man who never leaned forward to be heard. He listened first. That's the mark. She didn't give him history. He didn't need it. She gave him structure, players, motives, pressure points. She spoke like someone mapping a city, not reliving a nightmare. When she finished, he didn't react. He asked one question. Does he think you're finished? She nodded. He smiled, not wide, not friendly, just enough. That's useful. They didn't shake hands. They didn't promise outcomes. They exchanged understanding. He didn't offer protection. He offered balance. By the time she left, she knew something had changed, not because she'd gained a shield, but because someone else had gained a reason to look in the same direction she was already watching. And men like the middle son. They hate when they're no longer the smartest person in the room. 3 days later, his name surfaced again. Different tone this time. Urgent. Defensive. Someone had started asking him questions he couldn't answer without lying to the wrong people. Someone had touched a piece he thought was untouchable. She didn't celebrate, she prepared. Because when pressure hits men like him, they don't confess, they lash out. And the next move wouldn't come through letters or lawyers. It would come through someone desperate enough to make a mistake. The mistake came at night. It always does. Daylight makes men think. Darkness makes them act. She felt it before she saw it. The shift. The way the air in the house changed, like something had slipped through a crack that was never meant to open. No sound. That was the tell. Threats announced themselves. Violence that means business stays quiet. She didn't panic. Panic is loud. Panic gives away position. She moved slow, deliberate. One hand on the door frame, one ear on the floorboards. The children were sleeping down the hall, breathing soft, unaware that someone had just decided they were leverage again. Downstairs, a shadow moved where it shouldn't have been. Not clumsy, not drunk. Careful, professional enough to scare her, sloppy enough to fail. She let him think he was alone. That's the oldest trick in the book. Let the hunter believe the house belongs to him. He reached for the desk. The wrong desk. The drawer stuck for half a second, long enough. She stepped into the doorway and spoke just once. You're late. He froze, didn't turn around, didn't run. He knew better. Men like him always do right before they don't. I'm not here for trouble, he said. That was a lie told out of habit. She didn't move closer. Distance is power. It forces the other person to fill the silence. Someone paid you, she said. Not a question. He swallowed. Just needed something back. There's nothing here that belongs to you, she said, or to the man who sent you. That's when he turned. Young, too young to understand the weight he was carrying. Eyes darting, looking for exits that weren't there. Tell him, she said, calm as a locked door, that next time he wants to send a message, he should write it himself. The boy hesitated, thought about bluffing, thought about running. Then he made the smartest decision of his night. He left. No chase. No threat shouted after him. Fear works better when it's quiet. She locked the door, checked the children. Sat in the dark until the adrenaline burned off and only clarity remained. Now she knew. The middle son wasn't just nervous. He was cornered, and cornered men don't stop. They escalate. Somewhere across the city, he was already planning his next move, telling himself this time would be different, this time he'd finish it. What he didn't know, what would cost him everything, was that his shadow had already moved ahead of him. By morning, the board was clear. That's when you know the game has turned lethal. She didn't wait for another knock, didn't wait for another boy sent to prove loyalty. Waiting is for people who still believe mercy changes outcomes. She moved first, not loud, not reckless. She chose the kind of move that looks harmless until it's too late to stop. Paperwork. Ink beats bullets when you know where to aim it. Before noon, 3 letters were already moving through the city. One to a banker who hated surprises. one to a man with debts that preferred darkness, one to an official who pretended not to see things unless his name was about to be attached to them. Each letter said just enough. No accusations, no threats, just facts placed carefully on the table like a blade left unsheathed. By afternoon, the middle son felt it. Not fear yet, pressure. His account stalled. A meeting canceled without explanation. A man who used to answer on the first ring suddenly unavailable. Power doesn't vanish all at once, it leaks. And every leak makes noise if you know how to listen. He showed up at dusk. No escort, no uniform, no confidence. He stood in the doorway like a man who'd rehearsed 10 speeches and forgotten all of them the moment the door opened. "You sent for me," he said. She didn't invite him inside. That was deliberate. "I didn't," she said. "You came because you couldn't sit still." He smiled thin. "We can still fix this." That word, fix, men say it when they mean erase. "There's nothing broken on my side," she said. "You're the one bleeding." His jaw tightened. "You think you're protected," he said. "You think paper keeps you alive." She stepped closer, not aggressive, just enough to remind him she wasn't afraid. "No," she said. "I think men who move in the dark forget how many lights they passed on the way." He understood then that whatever he was planning next wouldn't be clean, wouldn't be quiet, and wouldn't be his to control. Behind him, the street stayed still, too still. He glanced over his shoulder once, just once. That's when he knew he wasn't alone anymore, and neither was she. The street didn't move, but the balance did. He felt it in his chest before his mind caught up. That pressure, the kind that tells a man he's no longer the one deciding how this ends. She watched him realize it, didn't rush him, let the truth settle where it hurt most. "You brought eyes with you," she said softly. "Didn't even notice when they stayed." He tried to laugh. It came out wrong. "You think you're running something now." "No," she said. "I'm surviving something you built." That's when footsteps came from the far end of the block, measured, unhurried, not hiding. The kind of walk that says, "We don't need permission to be here." 2 men stopped short of the porch light, didn't speak, didn't reach. They didn't need to. The middle son backed up a step, then another, pride pulling him forward, instinct dragging him away. "This isn't over," he said, forcing the words. She nodded. "That's usually what men say right before it is." He left fast after that, too fast to save face, too slow to outrun what was already circling him. The men waited until he disappeared, then turned to her. One of them spoke, voice low. "He's been making noise." "I know," she said. "Noise gets answered." "I don't want blood," she said. "I want distance." They exchanged a look, respect, not agreement. "Distance costs," the other one said. She met his eyes. "So does attention." They left without another word. That night she didn't sleep. Not because she was afraid, because she understood the truth now. The will didn't make her powerful. The war around it did. And somewhere the middle son was learning the same lesson, watching doors close, allies fade, realizing too late that the game he started didn't belong to him anymore. And when men like that realize they're losing, they don't retreat, they burn something on the way out. The fire didn't start with flames, it started with a rumor. Those are harder to put out. By the next week her name was moving in rooms she'd never been invited into, not spoken loud. Passed sideways, always followed by a pause. That pause meant danger. Someone was saying she'd gone too far. Someone was saying she'd forgotten her place. Someone was making sure those words reached men who solved problems with matches and knives. She knew who was feeding it. Men like him don't strike first. They poison the well and wait for thirst to do the rest. She adjusted, stopped taking the same routes, changed who handled messages, let a few small losses happen on purpose, just enough to make him think the pressure was working. That's how you draw a man out. You let him believe you're cracking. Then came the visit, not at night this time. Midday. Bold. Stupid, a carriage pulled up and didn't hide it. 2 men stepped out, hard faces, local muscle, not professionals, hired anger. They didn't knock, they leaned. "Word is you forgot who you answer to," one of them said. She looked at them like they were already history. "I answer to outcomes," she said, "and this one's not good for you." They laughed. That's the last sound men make before reality hits. She didn't raise her voice, didn't threaten. She named names, a debt here, a wife there, a brother with a problem nobody wanted public. Their smiles thinned. "You got 24 hours," the taller one said, trying to reclaim ground. "After that, this place becomes a lesson." She stepped closer, close enough they could smell certainty. "You don't have 24 minutes," she said, "and you're already late." One of them felt it first, the shift. The way the street behind them had gone quiet again. Too quiet, they left fast, didn't look back. That night the rumor changed. Now it wasn't that she'd forgotten her place. Now it was that getting near her was bad luck. And bad luck spreads faster than fire. Still, she knew better than to relax, because the man who started this wasn't finished. He was running out of options, and desperate men don't bluff. They choose one final move and bet everything on it. Somewhere right now he was deciding what to burn. When a man runs out of clean moves, he reaches for something ugly. She felt it before she saw it. The air changed. Too many eyes. Too much quiet pretending to be normal. The first sign wasn't violence. It was money. Accounts slowed. Deliveries missed their mark. A promise made in the morning got shaky by nightfall. That's how pressure works when it's wearing gloves. He wasn't trying to break her bones. He was trying to starve her reach. She counted it all. Every delay, every excuse, every silence where there should have been loyalty. Patterns don't lie, people do. By the third day, she knew exactly where the squeeze was coming from. He'd gone upstream, not after her. After the people who trusted her. That's a dangerous play, because it turns a private war into a public one. She called a meeting, small, quiet, only the ones who mattered, no speeches, no reassurance, just truth, clean and sharp. "Someone's testing us," she said. "If you're scared, say it now. If you're bought, leave before this gets loud." Nobody moved. That told her enough. So she sent her own message. Not words, actions. A shipment that was supposed to stall arrived early. A debt that was supposed to linger got erased. A man who'd been whispering doubts found his biggest backer suddenly unavailable. By sundown, the pressure flipped. That's when the real threat came. A folded note. No name, no seal, just one line written careful. "You protect the business, I'll take the blood." She read it once. Then again. That wasn't bluster, that was a line crossed. He wasn't coming for influence anymore, he was coming for family. She burned the note in the lamp and watched it curl. Some wars end with deals. Others only end when one side understands fear better than the other. She stood there a long time, already planning the response. Because now it wasn't about survival. Now it was about making sure he never tried this again. And she knew exactly where to strike. She didn't move right away. That's the mistake people make when blood gets mentioned. They rush. They react. They show their hand. She waited. Let him think the threat landed. Let him believe fear had finally found a home. Meanwhile, she changed the rules. The children didn't sleep where they slept the night before. The doors that used to open stayed locked. Faces that used to be familiar were replaced with quieter ones. Protection doesn't always look like muscle. Sometimes it looks like absence. Then she went hunting. Not with knives. With memory. Every man leaves a trail, even the careful ones, especially the ones who think they're smarter than everyone else. She traced his habits backward, where he drank when he wanted to feel important, who he talked to when he needed validation. Which lie he told most often, because that one's usually closest to the truth. By midnight she had it. His weakness wasn't rage, it was legacy. He was terrified of being erased. Of all his scheming ending with his name forgotten, his bloodline scattered, his story told by someone else. So she aimed there. A message went out before dawn, not to him. To the people who remembered him before the mask, before the money, before the threats. Old partners, old lovers. Old debts he thought were buried deep enough to stay quiet. By noon, the city was humming again. Not with rumors this time, with questions. Who really built what he claimed? Who really paid for the sins he walked away from? Who was he without the shadow he'd been hiding behind? That afternoon, he sent for her. Didn't demand. Didn't threaten, asked. That's how she knew she'd won the round. They met where he felt safe, public, neutral, too many witnesses for violence. He looked smaller than the last time she'd seen him, not weaker, just exposed. "You didn't have to do all this," he said. She studied him like a ledger with numbers that didn't add up. "You came for my blood," she replied. "This is restraint." He swallowed. "You end this," he said. "We walk away." She leaned in just enough for him to hear the certainty. "No," she said. "I make sure you never forget the cost." He stared at her, searching for the bluff. There wasn't one. He stood up, left his drink untouched, and walked away like a man whose future had just been rewritten without his consent. She didn't watch him go, because she knew something he didn't yet. Men like him don't walk away. They regroup. And the next move he made would decide whether this story ended in silence or in fire. He regrouped exactly the way she knew he would, not with noise, with paperwork. That's how men like him hide violence. Ink first, blood later. By the end of the week, officials started showing up where they'd never been before, asking questions that didn't need asking, looking at records they'd ignored for years, smiling like they were doing her a favor. That smile told her everything. This wasn't a street play anymore. He'd gone legal. She didn't panic. Panic is for people who think the law is neutral. She de-learned young that rules bend toward whoever knows where the pressure points are. So she read every notice twice, not for what it said, for what it avoided, and there it was, a missing signature, a date that didn't line up. A man listed twice under two different names, sloppy, rushed. He was moving faster than his caution could keep up. She made one call, just one, not to threaten, to remind. The kind of reminder that doesn't sound dangerous unless you know what it costs to ignore. By morning, the officials stopped coming. By afternoon, one of his shell men was suddenly unavailable, gone, nobody asking questions. That's when she got the second message. No paper this time, a face. A boy barely old enough to shave, standing too close to her door, trying to look brave. "Message," he said. She waited. "He says this ends tonight." She nodded once. "Tell him," she said calmly, "that endings are decided by whoever's still standing after the lights go out." The boy hesitated. "Should I tell him anything else?" She leaned down so the words landed heavy. "Tell him I already know where he's going to be." The boy left fast. She closed the door and exhaled slow, because now the board was set. No more rumors, no more notes, no more shadows pretending to be distance. Whatever he planned next wouldn't be quiet, and whatever she planned after that would make sure nobody ever mistook her silence for weakness again. Night fell heavy, not the kind that comforts you, the kind that waits. She didn't sit by a window, didn't pace, didn't pray. All that was for people hoping something wouldn't happen. She was preparing for it to happen exactly where she expected. He chose the place she predicted. Of course he did. Men like him mistake familiarity for control. Same building, same back entrance. Same idea that the past protects you if you revisit it often enough. She arrived early, not inside, across the street, watching. The lights upstairs flicked on one by one. Shadows moved behind curtains like fish in a tank. She counted heads, counted exits. Counted how many mistakes he was making by assuming she'd come alone. He was inside, pacing, angry now. The calm had burned off. That was good. Anger narrows vision. Then a second car pulled up. Unplanned, she stiffened. Wrong timing, wrong driver, too eager. This wasn't his move. This was someone else trying to cash in. That's when she understood the danger had shifted. The war wasn't just between her and him anymore. Other people smelled blood. She sent one runner, quiet, fast. No instructions beyond 4 words. "Stop what's coming." The runner hesitated. "If it's already moving." She met his eyes. "Then make it hesitate." Across the street, the second car's engine cut. Doors opened. Too many men, too confident, no patience. Amateurs. Inside the building, a light snapped off. Then another. Someone had noticed something was wrong. She stayed still. Because this moment right here is where stories split. Either the night explodes, or it swallows someone whole. And whichever way it went, by morning, one name was going to stop being spoken with confidence. The night chose quiet. That surprised everyone except her. The amateurs never made it past the sidewalk. Not because they were scared, because someone they trusted suddenly wasn't answering their phone, because the door they expected to open stayed locked, Because confidence collapses fast when coordination disappears. They scattered. No drama, no sirens, just confusion turning into survival instinct. Inside the building, he felt it. That's the part people never see, the moment a man realizes the violence he ordered didn't arrive. When he understands the world didn't move the way he imagined. He stepped outside alone. That was the mistake. She didn't confront him, didn't step into the light. Power doesn't need an entrance. A voice spoke from the dark. Calm, certain. This is where you stop. He turned too fast. Fear finally loud on his face. You think this ends me? He snapped. You think you win. She stepped just close enough to be seen. I already did, she said. You just didn't notice when. He looked around, searching for men who weren't coming, for allies who'd quietly chosen distance over loyalty. You can still walk away, he said. We both forget this. She shook her head. Forgetting is how this started. She didn't threaten him, didn't list consequences, he already felt them. That's the difference between power and noise. Power lets the other person finish the sentence themselves. He backed away, not defeated, contained. By morning his name would still exist, his money too, but the reach would be gone. The certainty, the confidence that made others dangerous. People would still work with him, they just wouldn't follow him into fire. She went home before dawn. The children slept, the house was still. The world hadn't ended, that's how real endings work. Not with explosions, but with limits. He lived, she lived free. And the city learned something it wouldn't say out loud. Silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it means the game is already over. The morning didn't announce itself. No headlines, no sirens, no victory speeches whispered in alleys. Just absence. That's how you know something real ended. His name still existed, but it moved differently now. Softer, careful. The kind of name people repeat without attaching themselves to it. He kept his money, kept his suits, kept his seat at certain tables. What he lost was gravity. Nobody leaned in when he spoke anymore. Nobody waited on his decisions. Men who used to orbit him started drifting, not dramatically, just enough to survive if he ever fell. That's the worst loss a man like that can take. Not destruction, irrelevance. She never chased confirmation, never asked what people were saying. When power works, it doesn't need reassurance. She focused on what mattered. The children grew without looking over their shoulders. Routes stayed boring. Days stayed predictable. Predictability is luxury when you've lived inside danger. Sometimes she'd catch herself listening anyway. Old habits don't die, they just quiet down. Years later, someone mentioned him casually, said he'd moved west, or south, or nowhere that mattered. The details didn't stick. That told her everything. Stories that last have weight. This one didn't. She outlived the threat. That's the ending most people don't respect because it doesn't look dramatic enough. No bodies, no handcuffs, no public reckoning, just survival done well. And here's the truth the streets understand better than history ever will. Winning isn't about standing on top of someone else. It's about making sure nobody ever gets the chance to stand on you again. She never wrote this down, never framed it as a lesson, but the city felt it, quietly, permanently. Power moved a little differently after her, not louder, smarter. And somewhere, long after the game had ended, a man who thought he'd planned everything would wake up in the night, wondering how the board slipped away from him without ever flipping. That's how you know who really won.